You wake up before dawn in ancient Rome, and the first thing that hits you is the smell. The overpowering stench of human waste, rotting garbage, and unwashed bodies fills your nostrils. You are lying on a thin mat on the floor of a fifth-story Insula apartment, one of the massive tenement buildings that house the common people of Rome. The wooden floor beneath you is cold, damp, and infested with insects that have been crawling over your body throughout the night. Your apartment is a single room, roughly 10 feet by 10 feet, and you share it with 7 other people. There are no windows, just a small opening in the wall that lets in minimal light and does nothing to ventilate the suffocating air. The ceiling is low, barely 6 feet high, made of cheap wood and plaster that constantly threatens to collapse. You can hear the family above you moving around, their footsteps causing dust and debris to fall onto your face. As you sit up, you feel the familiar ache in your back and joints. The thin mat provides no cushioning against the hard floor, and you have spent another night shifting positions, trying to find comfort that never comes. Your blanket is a threadbare piece of wool, full of holes, that does little to protect you from the cold. In winter, people in apartments like yours regularly freeze to death. In summer, they suffocate from the heat. You look around the darkness and see the shapes of your roommates beginning to stir. There is Marcus, the elderly laborer who coughs blood every morning. There is Julia, the young woman who sells her body on the streets to afford her share of the rent. There is the family of 4 crammed into one corner, their 2 children thin and malnourished, their eyes hollow with hunger. These are your neighbors, your fellow plebeians, and like you, they are trapped in a cycle of poverty with no escape. The apartment has no toilet, no running water, and no kitchen. If you need to relieve yourself, you have 2 options. You can climb down 5 flights of dangerous, narrow stairs in complete darkness to use the public latrine on the street level, or you can use the communal chamber pot in the corner of the room. Most people choose the pot, which has not been emptied in 3 days. The smell is indescribable. You hear shouting from the street below. It is barely light outside, but Rome never truly sleeps. The sound of cartwheels on stone echoes up through the building. During the day, carts are banned from the city streets, so all deliveries and transportation happen at night. This means you have been listening to the constant rumble of wagons, the shouting of drivers, and the braying of animals all night long. Sleep in ancient Rome is not restful. It is a brief period of semi-consciousness interrupted by noise, cold, insects, and the movements of the people packed around you. Your stomach growls with hunger. You have not eaten since yesterday morning, and that meal was a small piece of stale bread. Today, if you are lucky, you will get your daily grain dole from the government, but that will not happen until later. For now, you are hungry, and that hunger is a constant companion. It never truly goes away. Even on days when you eat, you are never full, never satisfied, never nourished. As you stand up, you feel something wet beneath your feet. The apartment above yours has terrible plumbing, and their wastewater regularly leaks through the ceiling and runs down the walls. The entire building is structurally unsound. Insulae. Like this one collapse regularly killing everyone inside. Just last month, the building 3 streets over came crashing down in the middle of the night, crushing 40 people to death. You think about this every day, wondering if today will be the day your building falls. You have no privacy here. Everyone can see everything you do. When you need to change your clothes, you do it in front of 7 strangers. When you are sick, everyone hears you vomit. When you cry from exhaustion and despair, everyone pretends not to notice. This is life in the insula. This is life for 90% of the population. The wealthy live in spacious houses with gardens and fountains. You live in a wooden fire trap stacked 6 stories high. The morning light begins to filter through the small opening in the wall. The walls are stained with mold and moisture. The floor is littered with trash, scraps of food, and human hair. There is a dead rat in the corner that has been there for 2 days. Nobody has the energy to remove it. The entire room is covered in a film of grime that never goes away. You need to start your day, but you have no water to wash your face, no soap to clean your hands, no toothbrush to clean your teeth. Personal hygiene in ancient Rome is a luxury for the rich. For you, it is an impossible dream. You will go weeks without bathing. Your hair is matted and full of lice. Your skin is covered in sores and rashes from the constant filth. Your teeth are rotting in your mouth. You look at the small cloth bag that contains all your possessions. Inside is one spare tunic, so worn and patched that it is barely held together. There is a wooden bowl for eating. There is a small knife with a handle that is cracked. And there is a clay oil lamp that you can rarely afford to fill with oil. These items represent everything you own in the world. You have no savings, no property, no assets of any kind. The children in the corner are beginning to cry. They are hungry as they are every morning. Their mother tries to soothe them, but she has nothing to give them. Their father left 2 months ago to find work in another city and never returned. Whether he is dead or simply abandoned his family, no one knows. The mother now works at a fulling shop, standing in vats of urine all day long to clean wealthy people's clothing. She comes home every night with her legs covered in sores from the caustic chemicals. She earns barely enough to pay her share of the rent. Her children are slowly starving. You watch as old Marcus begins his morning coughing fit. He has worked in the grain warehouses for 30 years, and the dust has destroyed his lungs. Every morning he coughs for 15 minutes straight, bringing up blood and mucus. He is dying slowly and he knows it. But he cannot stop working because the moment he stops he will lose his apartment and end up dying in the gutter. So he drags himself to the warehouses every day, coughing blood, struggling to breathe, moving sacks of grain that weigh more than he does. He is 52 years old, which makes him ancient by Roman plebeian standards. Most men in his profession die before they reach 45. The woman named Julia is applying white lead makeup to her face. It is poisoning her slowly, but it is required for her profession. The men who pay for her services want women with pale skin. The lead makeup gives her headaches, makes her dizzy, and is gradually destroying her internal organs. But without it, she cannot work. And if she cannot work, she cannot eat. She is 19 years old. She has been selling her body since she was 14. She will probably be dead before she reaches 25, either from the lead poisoning, from a violent customer, or from one of the countless diseases that afflict sex workers in ancient Rome. The sounds of the city are growing louder now. You can hear the voice of the building's landlord through the walls, a wealthy man who owns dozens of these insulae and never sets foot in them himself. He sends his rent collector, a brutal man named Gaius, who will be here within the hour. If you do not have your rent money, Gaius will beat you. If you cannot pay for 3 consecutive weeks, he will throw you and your belongings into the street. There are no tenant rights in ancient Rome. You exist at the mercy of landlords who see you as nothing more than a source of income. The rent for this miserable room is exorbitant. It costs you more to live in this 5th-floor death trap than it would cost a person in a provincial town to rent an entire house with a courtyard. But this is Rome, the capital of the empire, and housing prices are astronomical. The wealthy senators pass laws that are supposed to regulate rent prices, but these laws are never enforced. The landlords know they can charge whatever they want because people have no choice. You either pay the rent or you sleep in the street, where you will be robbed, beaten, or killed within days. You finally step toward the door, ready to descend the treacherous stairs and begin your day. But before you leave, you take one last look at this room, at these people, at this life. This is the reality of ancient Rome for the overwhelming majority of its population. The Rome of marble temples and triumphal arches. The Rome of senators and emperors. The Rome of glory and conquest. That Rome exists, but it exists for about 1% of the population. For you and everyone like you, Rome is this: a cramped, filthy, dangerous room in a building that might fall down at any moment, surrounded by people who are slowly dying from hunger, disease, and exhaustion. Welcome to morning in ancient Rome. You step out of your apartment and into the hallway, and immediately you understand your place in Roman society. You are nothing. You are less than nothing. In the rigid hierarchy of ancient Rome, You occupy the lowest tier of free citizens, and even that designation means almost nothing. You have no political power, no economic power, no social influence, and no hope of ever acquiring any of these things. Let's be very clear about where you stand in the Roman social order. At the very top are the patricians, the ancient noble families who trace their lineage back to the founding of Rome. These families own vast estates, control the Senate, and hold all the important religious and political positions. There are only about a dozen major patrician families, and they rule over a city of more than 1 million people. You will never meet a patrician. You will never even see one up close. They live in a different world. A world of marble villas and elaborate banquets and philosophical discussions. They literally do not know you exist. Below the patricians are the equestrians, the wealthy merchant and business class. These are the people who got rich through trade, banking, and military contracts. They're not as prestigious as the patricians, but they're fantastically wealthy. They own the shops, the warehouses, the shipping companies. They employ thousands of people, including you, when they need cheap labor. To an equestrian, you are a tool, a resource to be used and discarded. Your life has no more value than the mule that pulls their cart. Then come the plebeians, and this is where the hierarchy becomes more complex. The plebeians are technically the common citizens of Rome. But there are enormous differences within this class. At the top of the plebeian order are the wealthy plebeian families who have managed to accumulate property and political influence over generations. Some of these families are nearly as powerful as patricians. They serve in the Senate, they command armies, they own estates. But you are not one of these plebeians. You are at the bottom of the plebeian class. You are what the Romans call the urban poor, the proletarii, the people who own no property and contribute nothing to the state except children. The word proletarii literally means producers of offspring, because that's the only thing you're considered useful for. Creating more poor people who will serve as soldiers, laborers, and eventually corpses. The Roman state sees you as breeding stock for the legions and nothing more. In practical terms, what does this mean for your daily life? It means that you have no legal protection. If a wealthy man's slave bumps into you on the street and you push back, you can be arrested and executed. If a nobleman's son rapes your sister, there will be no investigation, no trial, no justice. If your employer decides not to pay you for a week's work, you have no recourse. The legal system exists to protect property and wealthy citizens. You are neither. You cannot vote in any meaningful way. Technically, Rome is a republic with citizen assemblies that vote on laws and elect magistrates. But the voting system is designed to ensure that wealthy citizens' votes count more than yours. The assemblies are organized by wealth, and the wealthy centuries vote first. By the time your century is called to vote, the outcome has usually already been decided. And even when your vote might matter, the assemblies are held during the day when you're working. If you take time off to vote, you don't eat that day, so you don't vote. Nobody you know votes. The republic is a fiction that doesn't include you. You cannot hold political office. Every political position in Rome requires property qualifications that you will never meet. To be a senator, you need to own property worth at least 1 million sesterces. You earn perhaps 300 sesterces per year. When you can find work, do the math. Even if you saved every single coin you earned and never spent anything on food, rent, or clothing, it would take you more than 3,000 years to qualify for the Senate. The system is not designed for social mobility. It's designed to keep power in the hands of those who already have it. You cannot serve in the legions in any prestigious capacity. The Roman army is divided by class. Wealthy citizens serve as cavalry, riding expensive horses and wearing elaborate armor. Middle-class citizens serve as heavy infantry, the backbone of the legions, equipped with quality weapons and armor they purchase themselves. You, if you're conscripted, will serve as light infantry or auxiliary troops. You'll be given minimal training, poor equipment, and sent to die in whatever frontier war is currently happening. If you survive and serve your 25 years, you might receive a small plot of land in some distant province. Most men in your position don't survive. Let's talk about how you're treated on the streets of Rome. When a wealthy man's litter comes down the street, carried by 8 slaves, you must press yourself against the wall and lower your eyes. If you don't move fast enough, the slaves will beat you with rods, and the man inside the litter won't even notice. When you go to the public fountains to get water, you wait in line for hours because wealthy households send their slaves to fill massive jugs. and slaves of wealthy masters take priority over free, poor citizens. You are less important than a slave who belongs to the right owner. The public spaces of Rome are not really public. They're controlled by the wealthy and their clients. The Forum, the heart of Roman civic life, is dominated by wealthy men conducting business, making deals, and discussing politics. You can walk through the Forum, but you're invisible. No one speaks to you. No one acknowledges your existence. If you tried to approach a senator or magistrate to petition for help, his bodyguards would beat you before you got within 10 feet. The patron-client system is supposed to provide social bonds across class lines. But in reality, it's just another form of exploitation. If you're lucky, you might attach yourself to a wealthy patron who will give you occasional small gifts in exchange for your political support and public displays of loyalty. You'll go to his house every morning before dawn and stand in his atrium with dozens of other clients waiting for him to emerge. When he does, you'll greet him effusively, compliment him, and hope he tosses you a few coins or a piece of bread. Then you'll accompany him through the streets, swelling his retinue, making him look important. In exchange, he might remember your name. This is considered a privilege. The religious system reinforces your worthlessness. The important priesthoods are held by patricians. The major festivals are organized by and for the wealthy. When you attend religious ceremonies, you stand at the back, behind the important people, straining to see the ritual. The gods themselves seem to favor the rich. After all, the rich can afford elaborate sacrifices, whole bulls, expensive incense, golden offerings. You can afford to burn a bit of grain. Clearly, the gods prefer the wealthy, which is why the wealthy prosper and you suffer. This is what the priests tell you, and you have no choice but to believe it. Your children, if you have any, will inherit your status. There are no schools for poor children. There is no education system. If you want your son to learn to read, you have to pay a tutor, which you cannot afford. So your son will be illiterate just like you. He'll work the same brutal jobs you work. He'll live in the same squalid conditions. He'll die young just like you will. The cycle is unbreakable. Poverty is hereditary in ancient Rome. Let's talk about respect. You have none. When wealthy Romans speak about the common people, they use words like mob, rabble, filth, and scum. The philosopher Cicero, celebrated for his eloquence and wisdom, wrote extensively about his contempt for the urban poor. He called you ignorant, lazy, and dangerous. Other writers were even less kind. The poet Juvenal mocked poor Romans as mindless creatures interested only in bread and circuses, free grain and entertainment. This is how the educated elite views you, as subhuman creatures to be controlled and occasionally entertained to prevent riots. You cannot eat at the same establishments as wealthy Romans. The nice taverns, the respectable eating houses, these places will not serve you. You look too poor, you smell too poor, you are too poor. You eat at standing room only popanae, greasy food stalls that serve barely edible food to crowds of desperate people. Or you eat your grain dole at home, boiled into a flavorless porridge. The elaborate feast described in Roman literature, with multiple courses and exotic ingredients. You will never experience anything remotely like that. You cannot access the same baths as wealthy Romans. Rome is famous for its elaborate bath complexes, but these exist in tiers. The nicest baths charge entrance fees you cannot afford and actively discourage poor people from entering. You use the cheapest public baths where the water is changed infrequently, where skin diseases spread through the crowds, where theft is constant. Bathing, which should be a basic hygiene practice, becomes another reminder of your inferior status. Even in death, the hierarchy follows you. Wealthy Romans are cremated with elaborate ceremonies, and their ashes placed in family tombs along the roads outside the city. You, when you die, will be wrapped in a cheap cloth and thrown into a mass grave, where the bodies of poor Romans and dead animals are dumped together. No ceremony, no memorial, no remembrance. You will vanish as if you never existed. This is your position in the Roman hierarchy. You step out of your apartment building and into the streets of Rome, and immediately you are surrounded by disease and death. The streets are not clean, well-maintained thoroughfares. They are open sewers filled with human waste, animal carcasses, rotting food, and standing water that breeds disease. Every step you take exposes you to countless pathogens that could kill you within days. The first thing you notice is the smell. It is not just unpleasant, it is physically overwhelming. The combination of human feces, Urine, vomit, rotting meat, and decomposing bodies creates a stench so powerful that it makes you gag. But you cannot show weakness. You cannot stop and vomit. You have work to do, and if you are late, you will not be paid. So you breathe through your mouth and keep walking. Look at the people around you. Nearly everyone has some visible sign of disease. There is a man with open sores covering his face and arms. There is a woman coughing blood into a cloth. There is a child with a distended belly. A clear sign of malnutrition and parasitic infection. There is an old man whose legs are swollen to twice their normal size. The skin stretched so tight it looks ready to burst. These are not unusual sights. This is normal in ancient Rome. Let us talk about the diseases that are killing people all around you. Malaria is endemic in the city. The mosquitoes breed in the standing water that collects everywhere, and they carry the parasite that causes the fever, chills, and eventually death. If you contract malaria, and you probably will at some point, you have no treatment options. You will suffer through the fever cycles, growing weaker each time until either your body fights it off or you die. Many people in Rome have chronic malaria, suffering recurring bouts throughout their lives. Typhoid fever spreads through the contaminated water supply. The public fountains, which provide drinking water for the poor, are often contaminated with human waste. When you drink from these fountains, you are literally drinking water mixed with feces. Typhoid causes high fever, severe abdominal pain, and bloody diarrhea. The mortality rate is approximately 20%. If you catch typhoid, you will spend weeks lying in your apartment, too weak to work, slowly dehydrating as your body expels fluids faster than you can replace them. Dysentery is even more common. It spreads through contaminated food and water, and it kills thousands of Romans every year. The symptoms are severe diarrhea, abdominal cramps, and fever. In a world without antibiotics or proper hydration therapy, dysentery is often fatal, especially for children and the elderly. You see people dying from dysentery constantly. They waste away over the course of weeks, their bodies unable to absorb any nutrition until they are nothing but skin stretched over bones. Tuberculosis is everywhere. The disease spreads in the crowded, poorly ventilated insulae where people live packed together like animals. When someone with tuberculosis coughs, they spray infectious droplets into the air, and everyone around them breathes it in. The disease attacks the lungs, causing a chronic cough, blood in the sputum, weight loss, and eventually death. There is no cure. If you contract tuberculosis, you will spend the next several years slowly suffocating as your lungs are destroyed from the inside. Parasitic infections are universal among the poor. Nearly everyone has intestinal worms. These parasites live in your gut, feeding on the nutrients from your food and reproducing inside your body. They cause malnutrition, anemia, abdominal pain, and in severe cases, intestinal blockage. You can sometimes see the worms in your feces, long white segments wriggling in the excrement. There is no effective treatment. The worms are a permanent part of your body. Skin diseases are rampant. Scabies, a parasitic mite infection, causes intense itching and rash. It spreads through physical contact, which is unavoidable in the crowded conditions of Rome. Once you have scabies, everyone in your apartment will get it. The itching is maddening, especially at night, and the constant scratching leads to open wounds that frequently become infected. Bacterial skin infections are common and often deadly. A simple cut or scrape can become infected, develop into an abscess, and then spread through your bloodstream, causing sepsis and death. Let us talk about the medical care available to you. For the wealthy, there are Greek physicians who practice sophisticated medicine based on the theories of Hippocrates and Galen. These doctors perform surgeries, prescribe herbal remedies, and provide ongoing care. But you cannot afford these doctors. Their fees are higher than your annual income. For you, medical care consists of folk remedies, superstition, and prayer. When you are sick, you might visit a local healer who will sell you herbs or ointments. Most of these remedies do nothing. Some of them make things worse. There is no scientific understanding of disease among the common healers. They believe illness is caused by imbalances in the bodily humors, or by curses from the gods, or by the evil eye. Their treatments reflect these beliefs. They might bleed you to release bad humors, which only weakens you further. They might give you purgatives that cause violent vomiting and diarrhea, dehydrating you when you need fluids most. The temples offer another form of medicine. You can go to the temple of Asclepius, the god of healing, and make an offering. You will sleep in the temple, hoping the god will visit you in a dream and cure you. Sometimes people claim to be healed this way. Usually they are not. But when you are desperate and in pain, you will try anything, even though the temple offering costs money you do not have. Surgery in ancient Rome is primitive and almost always fatal for the poor. If you need an amputation, it will be done without anesthesia, beyond some wine to dull the pain. You will be held down by several strong men while a surgeon saws through your limb. The pain is indescribable. The shock alone kills many people. If you survive the surgery, infection will probably kill you within days. There are no antibiotics, no sterile technique, no understanding of germ theory. Childbirth is one of the most dangerous experiences a woman can face. The maternal mortality rate is extremely high. Women die from hemorrhage, infection, obstructed labor, and numerous other complications. If a baby is too large or positioned incorrectly, both mother and child will die. There are no cesarean sections for living mothers. The only time this surgery is performed is after the mother has died, to try to save the baby. Midwives do what they can, but they have no tools, no training, and no understanding of sterile technique. Infant mortality is staggering. Approximately half of all children born in Rome die before the age of 5. They die from diarrheal diseases, respiratory infections, malnutrition, and countless other causes. Parents expect to lose children. It is considered normal. Families have many children knowing that only a few will survive to adulthood. This creates a strange emotional distance. You cannot afford to become too attached to infants because they will probably die. Dental problems cause constant suffering. There are no dentists for the poor. When your teeth rot, and they will rot because you have no way to clean them properly, you will suffer with the pain until the tooth falls out on its own or becomes so infected that it kills you. Dental abscesses can spread infection to your jaw, then to your bloodstream, causing sepsis. Many people die from what begins as a simple toothache. Mental illness is not understood or treated. If you develop what we would recognize as depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, or any other mental health condition, you will receive no help. People will assume you are possessed by demons or cursed by the gods. Your family might chain you up to prevent you from harming yourself or others, or they might simply abandon you to wander the streets as a homeless beggar. There is no compassion for mental illness in ancient Rome. The plague, when it comes, kills vast numbers. The Antonine Plague that struck Rome in the 2nd century AD killed millions across the empire. The symptoms were fever, vomiting, diarrhea, and pustules covering the body. People died by the thousands every day. Bodies piled up in the streets because there was no one left to bury them. If you live through a plague outbreak, you will watch most of the people you know die horrible deaths, and you will know that you could be next. There is nowhere to flee, no way to protect yourself, no treatment available. You simply wait to see if you will be among the dead or the survivors. This is medical reality in ancient Rome. Disease is everywhere, treatment is non-existent for the poor, and death is a constant presence. You would not survive this environment. You arrive at your workplace and your body already aches from exhaustion. You are a day laborer in ancient Rome, which means you own nothing, have no permanent employment, and must find work each morning, or you will not eat that day. Your job, when you can find it, is brutal physical labor that will eventually cripple or kill you. Today you have been hired to work at the construction site of a new public building. The work begins at dawn and continues until dusk, approximately 12 hours depending on the season. You will work the entire day with one short break at midday. There are no labor laws, no safety regulations, no workers' rights of any kind. You are a tool that the contractor has rented for the day, and like any tool, you will be used until you break. Your first task is moving stone blocks. These blocks weigh hundreds of pounds each. You and 3 other men must lift each block onto a wooden sledge, drag the sledge to the construction site, then lift the block off and position it where the foreman indicates. You have no mechanical advantage, no pulleys or levers, just human muscle. Each lift requires maximum effort. You feel your back strain, your muscles scream, your hands tear open on the rough stone. The foreman stands nearby with a wooden rod. If you move too slowly, he strikes you across the back. If you drop a block, he strikes you. If you complain, he strikes you and then fires you, and you will not be paid for the hours you have already worked. So you keep working, lifting and dragging, hour after hour, your body pushed beyond its limits. You are barefoot. The construction site is covered in sharp stones, wooden splinters, and broken pottery. Your feet are already cut and bleeding. By the end of the day, they will be shredded. You have cuts on your feet that never fully heal because you walk on them every day. These cuts are constantly being reinfected with dirt and debris. The pain is intense, but you have learned to ignore it. Pain is simply part of existence. Around you, accidents happen constantly. A man loses his grip on a rope and a heavy timber falls, crushing another worker's leg. The injured man screams, his leg bent at an impossible angle, bone protruding through the skin. The foreman looks annoyed. He has the man dragged off the site and left in the street. He will probably die from infection within a few days. A new worker is hired immediately to replace him. Work does not stop for injuries or death. The sun climbs higher and the heat becomes unbearable. You are wearing only a thin tunic and it is soaked with sweat. You are constantly thirsty, but water is not provided. There is a public fountain 2 streets away, but you are not permitted to leave the site during work hours. By midday, you are severely dehydrated. Your head pounds. Your vision blurs. Your mouth is so dry you can barely swallow. But you keep working because stopping means losing your pay. At midday, you get a brief break. You are given a small portion of bread and some diluted wine. This is your only meal until tonight. The bread is hard and moldy, but you eat it gratefully. The wine is mostly water with a bit of wine mixed in, barely enough to relieve your thirst. You eat quickly, sitting on the ground, and then work resumes. The afternoon is worse than the morning. Your body is already exhausted, your muscles depleted, your hands raw and bleeding. But the work continues at the same brutal pace. You lift and drag, lift and drag. Each movement causes pain. Your back feels like it might snap. Your shoulders and arms have gone numb from the constant strain. You keep working. Let us talk about the different types of work available to poor Romans like you. If you are not at a construction site, you might be working at the docks loading and unloading ships. This work is just as brutal. You carry heavy sacks of grain up and down narrow gangplanks. One slip means falling into the water, and most Romans cannot swim. Men drown at the docks regularly. The grain dust fills your lungs, causing respiratory disease that will kill you slowly over years. You might work in a fullery, one of the workshops that clean and process cloth. This means standing in vats of urine all day, trampling cloth to clean it. The ammonia in the urine burns your skin, causing painful sores that never heal. You breathe the fumes constantly, damaging your lungs. Your legs are permanently stained and scarred from the caustic chemicals. But the work pays a few coins, so you do it. You might work in a pottery workshop mixing clay and shaping vessels. The work destroys your hands. The clay dries out your skin until it cracks and bleeds. The wheel causes repetitive stress injuries to your wrists and fingers. The kiln exposes you to intense heat and toxic fumes. Potters often develop respiratory diseases and joint problems. But again, it pays, so you do it. You might work as a porter, carrying goods through the city on your back. Rich people do not carry their own purchases. They have people like you to do it. You might carry a load of groceries weighing 50 pounds across half the city for a payment of a few copper coins. The weight compresses your spine. The straps cut into your shoulders. By the time you are 30, your back will be permanently bent. Your body broken from years of carrying loads too heavy for any human. You might work in the sewers, maintaining the massive underground tunnels that carry waste out of the city. This is perhaps the worst job available. You wade through human waste in complete darkness, breathing toxic fumes, surrounded by rats and disease. Men who work in the sewers rarely live past 30. They die from infection, from toxic gas exposure, or from drowning when the sewers flood during heavy rain. But the job pays slightly better than other labor, so desperate men take it. You might work in a tannery, processing animal hides into leather. This involves scraping rotting flesh from hides, then soaking them in vats of urine, feces, and chemicals. The smell is indescribable. The work is so revolting that tanneries are located outside the city walls to spare residents the stench. You work surrounded by rotting meat and excrement, your hands permanently stained and damaged by the chemicals. But it is work, and work means survival. Or you might work in the mines, which is essentially a death sentence. Roman mines are worked by slaves and the very poorest free citizens who have no other options. You descend into narrow tunnels, sometimes crawling on your hands and knees through spaces barely wide enough for a human body. You chip away at rock with primitive tools in near total darkness. The air is bad, often toxic. Cave-ins happen constantly. Men die trapped under tons of rock, suffocating slowly in the darkness. Lung disease from the dust kills those who survive the cave-ins. If you work in the mines, you will not live long. The workday finally ends as the sun sets. You have worked for 12 hours with only one brief break. Your pay for this day of brutal labor is 3 sesterces, which is barely enough to buy food for one day and contribute to your rent. You are exhausted, injured, and in pain, but you will return tomorrow and the next day and the day after that until your body gives out completely. There are no days off. There are no sick days. There are no holidays for workers like you. The wealthy celebrate numerous festivals throughout the year, but you still work. If you take a day off, even if you are seriously ill, you do not get paid and you might lose your position to another desperate worker. So you work every single day, no matter how sick or injured you are. There is no such thing as retirement. You will work until you physically cannot anymore, and then you will starve. There are no pensions, no social programs for elderly workers. When your body finally breaks down from decades of abuse, you will end up begging in the streets until you die. You see these men all the time. Former laborers whose bodies have been destroyed by years of brutal work, now reduced to begging for scraps. Workplace injuries are common and usually permanent. A damaged back, a crushed hand, a crippled leg. These injuries end your ability to work, which means they end your life. There is no compensation for workplace injuries. If you are hurt on the job, you are simply discarded and replaced. Your employer has no responsibility for your well-being. This is work in ancient Rome for the common laborer. It is brutal, dangerous, exhausting, and offers no hope of improvement. You will do this work until your body fails, and then you will die in poverty. You would not survive this daily grind of labor. When your workday finally ends, your first thought is food. You are starving. You have eaten only a small piece of bread at midday, and your body has burned thousands of calories through 12 hours of brutal physical labor. But eating is not simple in ancient Rome. Food is expensive, often scarce, and what you can afford is barely sufficient to keep you alive. Let us talk about what you eat as a poor Roman. Your staple food is grain, specifically wheat when you can get it, but more often barley, which is cheaper and considered inferior. The government provides a grain dole to Roman citizens, a daily ration of wheat that is supposed to prevent mass starvation. You go to the distribution point and receive your portion, roughly enough grain to make a loaf of bread per day. This grain dole is the only thing preventing you from immediate starvation. But the grain dole is not enough to live on. It provides basic calories, but little else. You are constantly hungry, even on days when you receive your full ration. The grain must be ground into flour and baked into bread, which requires fuel for a fire. You do not have a kitchen or an oven in your apartment, so you either eat the grain boiled into a porridge or you pay a baker to bake it into bread, which costs extra money you barely have. The bread you eat is coarse and gritty. It is made from low-quality grain that has not been properly milled, so it contains bits of stone and grit from the grinding process. Eating this bread wears down your teeth. Many Romans have teeth that are ground flat by the time they reach middle age. The constant chewing on gritty bread also breaks teeth, leading to dental abscesses and infections. Beyond bread, your diet consists of very little. You occasionally have some olive oil to add flavor to your bread or porridge. You might have some cheap wine, which is usually diluted with water because pure wine is too expensive. You might have some vegetables when they are in season and cheap enough. Onions, garlic, cabbage, turnips. These are boiled into a watery soup that provides minimal nutrition. Meat is rare and expensive. You might eat meat a few times per year, during major festivals when animals are sacrificed and the meat is distributed to the crowd. The rest of the time, meat is completely beyond your means. A chicken costs as much as several days of your wages. Beef and pork are even more expensive. Fish is available, but the cheap fish sold to the poor is often spoiled or of such low quality that it makes you sick. Protein deficiency is constant. Your body needs protein to repair the damage done by daily physical labor, but you rarely get enough. This leads to muscle wasting, weakness, and slow recovery from injuries. You feel tired all the time, not just from overwork but from malnutrition. Your body is slowly consuming itself, breaking down muscle tissue to provide the amino acids it needs to function. Vitamin deficiencies cause various diseases. Scurvy from lack of vitamin C causes your gums to bleed and your teeth to fall out. Your old wounds reopen. You bruise easily. Rickets from lack of vitamin D causes bone deformities, especially in children. You see children all over Rome with bowed legs and stunted growth from inadequate nutrition. Night blindness from vitamin A deficiency is common. Pellagra from lack of niacin causes skin lesions and dementia. Let us talk about how you obtain food beyond the grain dole. You have to purchase additional food from markets and shops, but prices are high, and your wages are minimal. A day's wages might buy you a small amount of oil, some vegetables, and maybe a bit of cheap wine. You are constantly calculating in your head whether you can afford to eat today, or whether you should save the money for rent. The food sold to the poor is often contaminated or spoiled. Merchants know you have no choice but to buy their products, so they sell food that wealthier customers would reject. The oil is rancid, the vegetables are rotting, the wine is watered down or mixed with cheaper substances. You buy this food anyway because you have no alternative. You eat it and hope it does not make you too sick to work tomorrow. Food poisoning is frequent. The lack of refrigeration means food spoils quickly in the Roman heat. Meat and fish go bad within hours. Merchants try to mask the smell of spoiled food with spices and herbs. You eat it, and within hours you are violently ill with vomiting and diarrhea. This dehydrates you further and weakens your already malnourished body, but you cannot take time off work to recover, so you continue working while sick. Storage is a major problem. You have no way to keep food fresh in your apartment. There is no cool storage, no ice, no preservation method beyond salting, which you cannot afford. Any food you buy must be eaten immediately. You cannot stock up when prices are low. You must purchase food daily, paying whatever the current price is, subject to market fluctuations you cannot control. The public fountains provide your drinking water, but this water is often contaminated. The aqueducts bring water from distant sources, but by the time it flows through miles of pipes and sits in public fountains, it has been contaminated with lead from the pipes, with waste from people washing in the fountains, with debris and insects. You drink this water because you have no choice. The constant consumption of contaminated water causes chronic illness. Children suffer most from malnutrition. Growing bodies need adequate protein, vitamins, and minerals. Poor Roman children get none of these in sufficient quantities. They are stunted in growth, their bones weak, their immune systems compromised. Many children develop distended bellies from protein deficiency and parasitic infections. They look skeletal everywhere except their swollen abdomens. These children, if they survive to adulthood, will be smaller and weaker than they should be because of childhood malnutrition. Pregnant and nursing women face severe nutritional challenges. A woman's body needs extra nutrients during pregnancy and lactation, but poor Roman women receive no additional food. They must share their inadequate rations with the growing fetus or nursing infant. This leads to complications in pregnancy, difficult births, and high rates of maternal mortality. Babies born to malnourished mothers are smaller and weaker, less likely to survive infancy. The wealthy eat completely differently. Rich Romans have elaborate meals with multiple courses. They eat meat regularly, fresh fruits and vegetables, imported delicacies, fine wines. They have cooks who prepare sophisticated dishes. They never experience hunger. A single meal at a wealthy Roman's dinner party contains more food than you eat in a week. This disparity is obvious and constant, a reminder of your inferior status. Sometimes you go days without adequate food. Work might be scarce, and without wages you cannot buy food beyond the grain dole. During these periods you experience true starvation. Your body begins to consume its own tissues for energy. You become weak, dizzy, unable to think clearly. Your immune system fails, making you vulnerable to every disease. Starvation does not always kill quickly. Sometimes it is a slow decline over months or years. Food riots happen when grain supplies run low. If there is a bad harvest or if grain shipments are delayed, the price of wheat skyrockets and even the grain dole is threatened. The population becomes desperate. Crowds gather in the forum demanding bread. Sometimes these riots turn violent. The authorities respond with force. People are killed, but the desperation is real. Without grain, Thousands will starve within days. You sometimes resort to eating things that are not really food. When you are desperate enough, you eat scraps scavenged from garbage, food that has been thrown out by wealthier households. You eat things you know might make you sick because the alternative is starving. You are not alone in this. Thousands of Romans survive by scavenging through the city's waste. There are no food safety standards, no regulations on what can be sold as food. Merchants adulterate their products constantly. Wine is watered down or mixed with harmful substances. Oil is mixed with cheaper fats. Bread is bulked up with sawdust or chalk. You consume these adulterants daily, slowly poisoning yourself because you cannot afford pure, unadulterated food. This is the reality of food in ancient Rome for the poor. You are constantly hungry, constantly malnourished, constantly one bad week away from starvation. The food you can afford is inadequate, contaminated, and slowly killing you. Your body is breaking down from lack of proper nutrition, even as you work it to exhaustion every day. This is not living. This is merely surviving day by day, meal by meal, in a state of perpetual hunger. You would not survive this food scarcity and chronic malnutrition. You live in constant fear of Roman justice because Roman justice is not about fairness or rehabilitation. It is about terror, spectacle, and maintaining order through extreme violence. As a poor plebeian, you have almost no legal protections, and the punishments for even minor crimes are horrific beyond modern comprehension. Let us start with the basic reality. You are not equal before the law. Roman law explicitly distinguishes between honestiores, the respectable classes, and humiliores, the lower classes. You are humiliores. This means that for the same crime, you will receive a much harsher punishment than a wealthy citizen. A wealthy man might pay a fine for an offense that would get you crucified. Crucifixion is the standard punishment for serious crimes committed by the poor. It is the most brutal form of execution ever devised. If you are convicted of theft, assault, escaping from slavery, or any other serious offense, you will be crucified. The process is designed to maximize suffering and create a public spectacle that terrifies the population into obedience. First, you are stripped naked and flogged. Roman flogging is not a symbolic punishment. It is done with a flagrum, a whip with multiple leather strands, each embedded with pieces of bone or metal. The flogger strikes your back repeatedly, tearing the skin and muscle with each blow. The pain is excruciating. Many people die during the flogging itself. Those who survive are left with their backs shredded, bones sometimes visible through the torn flesh. Then you are forced to carry the crossbeam of your cross through the streets to the place of execution. The crossbeam weighs perhaps 100 pounds. You are already weak from blood loss and shock. Your shredded back is in agony with every movement. You stumble through the streets while crowds watch and jeer. If you fall, you are beaten until you rise and continue. This walk is part of the punishment, part of the spectacle. At the execution site, you are laid on the ground and your wrists are nailed to the crossbeam. The nails are driven through your wrists, not your palms, because nails through the palms would tear out under your body weight. The nails sever nerves, causing indescribable pain that shoots up your arms. Then the crossbeam is lifted and attached to a vertical post. Your feet are positioned and a single nail is driven through both feet into the post. Now comes the actual dying, which can take days. Crucifixion kills through asphyxiation. When you hang by your arms, your chest cavity is compressed and you cannot breathe properly. To breathe, you must push up on your nailed feet, causing excruciating pain. You push up to breathe, then your leg muscles give out and you sag down, unable to breathe. Then you push up again. This cycle continues for hours or days until you are too exhausted to push up anymore, and you suffocate. During this time, you are exposed to the elements. The sun burns you during the day. The cold torments you at night. You are denied water, so you die of thirst while simultaneously suffocating. Insects swarm over your open wounds. Birds may peck at your flesh while you still live. You void your bowels and bladder hanging in your own waste. You are displayed as a warning to others. Your agony a public spectacle. The worst part is that crucifixion happens constantly in Rome. Along major roads you regularly see people crucified. Sometimes there are dozens at once, a whole row of crosses with dying people hanging from them. After a slave rebellion, thousands were crucified along the Appian Way, one every few dozen yards for miles. This is normal. This is how Rome maintains order. But crucifixion is not the only brutal punishment. Damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts, is another common penalty. You are sent into the arena, often without weapons, to be killed by wild animals for the entertainment of the crowd. Lions, bears, leopards, even bulls are used. The animals are often starved beforehand to make them more aggressive. You are pushed into the arena and the animal is released. The crowd cheers as the beast attacks you. If you run, you are chased. If you fight, you have no chance. The animal tears into you, its teeth and claws ripping your flesh. You are eaten alive while thousands watch and cheer. This is entertainment in Rome. This is justice. Some criminals are forced to fight as gladiators, which is essentially a slower form of execution. You are given minimal training and thrown into the arena to fight other condemned criminals or professional gladiators. The fights are to the death. If you win, you fight again, and again. Eventually, you will lose and you will die in the sand, your blood adding to the entertainment value of the games. Burning alive is another punishment. You are tied to a post and wood is piled around you. The fire is lit, and you burn to death over the course of minutes or hours depending on how the fire is arranged. The pain is beyond description. Every nerve in your body screams as your flesh burns. The smell of your own burning flesh fills your nostrils. You can hear your skin crackle and pop, and throughout the crowd watches. For lesser crimes, you might receive a beating. But a Roman beating is not a minor punishment. You are tied to a post and beaten with rods or whips until the authorities decide you have suffered enough. This beating can cripple you for life. Broken bones, permanent nerve damage, and internal injuries are common. Many people die from infections days or weeks after a beating. Amputation is used as punishment for theft. If you are caught stealing, your hand might be cut off. This is done in public without anesthesia. Your hand is placed on a block and severed with an axe or sword. The wound is cauterized with a hot iron to prevent you from bleeding to death immediately. If you survive, you are now crippled, unable to work, condemned to begging for the rest of your short life. The legal process itself is a nightmare for the poor. You have no right to a lawyer. You cannot afford to hire an advocate to speak for you. When you are accused, you stand before a magistrate alone. The testimony of a wealthy citizen is worth more than yours. If a wealthy man accuses you of a crime, his word will be believed over yours automatically. You can be convicted based entirely on his testimony. Torture is routinely used to extract confessions. If you are accused of a serious crime, you will be tortured until you confess, whether you are guilty or not. The methods are brutal. You might be stretched on a rack, your joints slowly dislocated. You might be suspended by your wrists tied behind your back, your shoulders dislocating under your own weight. You might be burned with hot irons. Eventually, everyone confesses under torture, guilty or innocent. Slavery is also used as punishment. For some crimes, you can be sold into slavery, which is essentially a death sentence. Slaves in Roman mines or on galley ships rarely survive more than a few years. Being sentenced to slavery in the mines means dying slowly in darkness, chained to other condemned men, working until you drop dead. There is no appeals process for people like you. Once you are convicted, the sentence is carried out immediately. There is no time to gather evidence in your defense, no opportunity to prove your innocence. Justice is swift and brutal. Within hours of conviction, you could be nailed to a cross or thrown to wild animals. Even being accused of a crime can destroy you. If you are accused and somehow avoid conviction, you are still marked. People will assume you are guilty. Employers will not hire you. Your reputation is destroyed. In a society where reputation and social connections are everything, even an accusation can be a death sentence. The authorities use this brutal justice system to maintain control over the massive urban population. Fear keeps the poor in line. Everyone knows what happens to those who break the law, or even to those who are falsely accused. The crucified bodies along the roads, the public executions in the arena, the screams of those being tortured, these are constant reminders that resistance is futile. You live every day knowing that one false accusation, one moment of desperation that leads you to steal bread, one angry encounter with someone wealthier than you, could end with you hanging on a cross or being torn apart by animals in the arena. This is not justice. This is state terrorism. This is how Rome rules. And you would not survive the system of terror and punishment. If you are a woman in ancient Rome, your suffering is multiplied. You face all the hardships that men face: poverty, hunger, disease, brutal labor. But you also face additional horrors specific to being female in this society. Your life is controlled by men, your body is not your own, and your most basic biological functions could easily kill you. Let us start with the most fundamental reality. You have almost no legal rights. You are under the legal authority of your father until you marry, and then under the authority of your husband. You cannot own property independently. You cannot enter into contracts. You cannot vote or participate in politics. You cannot hold public office. You are legally classified as similar to a child or a slave, someone who needs a male guardian to make decisions for you. You are married young, probably between 12 and 15 years old. You have no say in who you marry. Your father arranges the marriage, usually to benefit himself economically or socially. Your opinion is irrelevant. If you are lucky, your husband is not actively cruel. If you are unlucky, he is violent and you have no recourse. Domestic violence is not considered a crime. A husband has the legal right to discipline his wife however he sees fit, including physical beatings. Childbirth is the most dangerous thing you will face. The maternal mortality rate in ancient Rome is approximately 1 to 2% per birth. This might not sound high, but remember that women typically have multiple pregnancies. If you have 7 pregnancies, you have a roughly 10 to 15% chance of dying in childbirth over your lifetime, and many women have more than 7 pregnancies. Let us talk about what childbirth actually involves in ancient Rome. When your time comes, you will give birth at home, assisted by a midwife if your family can afford one, or by female relatives if not. There are no doctors present. There is no medical intervention available. There is no pain relief. You simply endure the labor for however many hours or days it takes. If the labor is straightforward, you might survive. But complications are common and almost always fatal. If the baby is too large or positioned incorrectly, you will die. There is no cesarean section for living mothers. If the baby is stuck, you will labor until you die from exhaustion, hemorrhage, or infection. The midwife cannot save you. All she can do is wait and hope. If you hemorrhage during or after birth, you will bleed to death. There is no way to stop severe bleeding. The midwife might pack your uterus with cloth, but this often causes infection rather than solving the problem. If you tear badly during delivery, the midwife will try to stitch you up. But without sterile technique or antibiotics, infection is almost certain. Puerperal fever, infection of the reproductive tract after childbirth, kills thousands of women every year. Even if you survive the birth, your body is damaged. Multiple pregnancies and traumatic deliveries cause permanent injuries. Pelvic floor damage leads to incontinence. Fistulas, abnormal openings between your vagina and bladder or rectum, cause constant leaking of urine or feces. You live the rest of your life in pain and humiliation, unable to control your own bodily functions. And there is no treatment, no surgery that can fix these problems. You are expected to bear as many children as possible. Your value to your family and society is measured by your fertility. Each pregnancy is another roll of the dice with your life. You watch your friends and neighbors die in childbirth. You know the risks, but you have no choice. Refusing your husband is not an option. Contraception exists but is unreliable and often dangerous. Herbs used for contraception can poison you. Physical barrier methods are uncommon and expensive. If you survive childbirth, you must immediately begin caring for the infant while also resuming your other work. There is no maternity leave, no recovery period. If you are wealthy enough to have slaves, they might help. But if you are poor, you are back to your work within days, your body still bleeding and healing, while simultaneously nursing a newborn. Nursing itself is difficult. You are malnourished, which affects your milk supply. The baby may not get enough milk and will suffer from malnutrition, or you might have too much milk, leading to painful engorgement and infections like mastitis. A breast infection without antibiotics can turn septic and kill you. Even nursing, the most natural function, becomes a potential death sentence. Many women die from infections in the weeks after childbirth. The trauma of delivery creates openings for infection. The lack of hygiene means bacteria enters easily. Puerperal sepsis causes high fever, severe pain, and death within days. You watch helplessly as your body succumbs to infection, knowing you are leaving your newborn child motherless. Let us talk about the additional dangers women face in daily life. Sexual violence is common and rarely punished. If you are assaulted by a man of higher social status, you have no legal recourse. Rape of a slave or poor woman is not considered a serious crime. If you report it, you will likely be blamed for tempting the man. Your reputation will be destroyed, making it even harder to survive. If you are unmarried and become pregnant, you face complete social destruction. An illegitimate child brings shame on your entire family. You might be thrown out of your home with nowhere to go. Infanticide is common in these cases. Many women expose their unwanted infants, leaving them to die of exposure or be taken by strangers. This is legal and socially acceptable. The infant's death is preferable to the shame of illegitimacy. If your husband dies, your situation becomes even more precarious. Widows have few options. You might return to your father's house if he is alive, but you are an additional mouth to feed, unwanted and burdensome. You might remarry quickly, but as an older woman with children, you are not a desirable match. Many widows end up destitute, begging or selling their bodies to survive. Prostitution is one of the few ways a destitute woman can earn money, but it is a death sentence. Sex workers in Rome face constant violence from clients. They have no legal protections. They can be beaten, raped, or killed without consequence. They contract diseases that will kill them slowly. The lead makeup they use to appear attractive is poisoning them. Most prostitutes die before the age of 30. Let us talk about the work available to poor women. You might work in a fullery, standing in vats of urine to clean cloth. The caustic chemicals destroy the skin on your legs. You might work as a servant in a wealthy household, subject to the whims and potential violence of your employers. You might work spinning and weaving, repetitive labor that ruins your hands and eyes. The pay for women's work is always less than for men's work, even when the labor is equally difficult. If you work outside the home, you also carry the full burden of domestic labor. You must cook, clean, care for children, and maintain the household, all while also working for wages. There is no sharing of domestic responsibilities. Men do not help with housework or childcare. Everything falls on you. You work 18-hour days, exhausted constantly, your body breaking down from the dual burden of wage labor and domestic labor. Your clothing offers no protection from the elements. Poor women wear simple tunics made of coarse fabric. In winter, you freeze. You have no warm coat, no shoes. You walk through the cold streets, your thin tunic offering minimal protection. In summer, the heat is oppressive and you have no relief. You work in the sun all day, your skin burning, your body overheating. Menstruation is a monthly ordeal without proper sanitary supplies. You use rags that must be washed and reused, but you have minimal water and no privacy for cleaning them. During your period, you continue to work because you have no choice. The cramping and bleeding are ignored. You push through the pain because stopping means not eating. If you live long enough to reach menopause, your value to society plummets. Postmenopausal women are considered useless. You can no longer bear children, which was your primary purpose. Older women are often abandoned by their families, left to fend for themselves in their declining years. You might end up begging, homeless, dying alone in the streets. Medical understanding of women's bodies is primitive and often harmful. Doctors believe the uterus can wander around the body, causing illness. Treatments for gynecological problems are useless or dangerous. If you have a tumor or other serious condition, there is no treatment. You will suffer with it until it kills you. Female infanticide is practiced when families cannot afford to raise daughters. Girls are considered less valuable than boys because they will require dowries. Many female infants are simply exposed and left to die. If you are born female and poor, you are unwanted before you even take your first breath. This is the reality of being a woman in ancient Rome. Every aspect of your existence involves additional suffering, additional danger, additional exploitation. You would not survive being a woman in this brutal society. The amphitheater dominates the landscape of Rome, and it represents everything brutal about this society. The Colosseum and other arenas are where Romans gather to watch people and animals die for entertainment. You might attend the games because they are free and provide a brief escape from your miserable life. But the spectacle you witness is a reminder of the cheapness of human life in Rome. Let us be clear about what happens in the amphitheater. These are not sporting events. These are mass executions disguised as entertainment. Thousands of people and animals die in the arena every year, killed in elaborate and creative ways for the amusement of the crowd. And the crowd loves it. They cheer for death. They demand blood. This is what passes for culture in Rome. The games begin in the morning with the Venationes, the animal hunts. Exotic animals from across the empire are brought to Rome and released into the arena to be killed. Lions, tigers, elephants, bears, rhinoceroses, giraffes. Animals that most Romans have never seen are paraded out and slaughtered. Sometimes the animals fight each other. Sometimes they are hunted by trained beast fighters. Always they die, often after suffering for the entertainment value. Thousands of animals are killed in a single day of games. During the inauguration of the Colosseum, 9,000 animals were killed over 100 days of games. The arena floor runs red with blood. The smell of blood and death fills the air. The crowd watches in fascination as magnificent creatures are destroyed for no purpose except entertainment. But the animals are just the warm-up. At midday comes the real entertainment, the execution of criminals. This is when people like you, if you are unlucky enough to be convicted of a crime, are killed in the arena. These executions are staged as elaborate theatrical productions. You might be forced to reenact a myth, dressed as a character from legend and then killed as part of the story. The executions are designed to be as brutal and creative as possible. You might be crucified in the arena, while the crowd watches you die slowly. You might be burned alive, tied to a post as flames consume you. You might be torn apart by wild animals. You might be forced to fight other condemned criminals with weapons. A fight to the death where the loser dies and the winner faces another opponent until he too dies. The crowd watches these executions while eating lunch. Death is literally midday entertainment. Vendors sell food and drinks while human beings are tortured and killed a few dozen yards away. The crowd is not horrified. They are entertained. They bet on how long someone will survive. They critique the quality of the deaths. Suffering is a spectacle. After the executions come the gladiatorial combats, the main event that everyone has been waiting for. Gladiators are mostly slaves, prisoners of war, or condemned criminals who have been trained to fight. They are better armed and trained than the people executed at midday, but they are still going to die. It is just a question of when. The different types of gladiators fight in different styles. The Murmillo fights with a sword and large shield. The Retiarius fights with a trident and net. The Secutor pursues with sword and shield. These different matchups create variety for the crowd. But regardless of style, the purpose is the same. Kill or be killed for the entertainment of spectators. The fights are bloody and brutal. Gladiators are trained to make the combat exciting, to show skill and bravery, but ultimately someone must die. When a gladiator is defeated and wounded, the crowd decides his fate. Thumbs up for mercy, thumbs down for death. If the crowd demands death, the victor must kill the defeated gladiator immediately, usually by stabbing him in the throat or through the ribs into the heart. The mortality rate for gladiators is debated by historians, but it is certainly significant. Even if a gladiator survives a particular fight, he will fight again and again until eventually he loses. Some gladiators become famous and survive many fights, but most die within a few years. Their bodies are disposed of in mass graves, discarded like trash after they have provided their entertainment value. The medical care for gladiators is better than what you receive as a poor civilian, because gladiators are valuable property. But even with medical care, the wounds they suffer are catastrophic. Deep cuts, severed limbs, punctured organs, these injuries are common. Many gladiators die not in the arena, but days later from infection or hemorrhage. Women can also be gladiators, though this is less common and considered scandalous. Female gladiators fight other women or sometimes dwarfs, providing exotic entertainment for the crowd. They are subjected to the same violence as male gladiators. They die in the same ways. Their sex offers them no protection, no mercy. The psychological impact on gladiators is rarely discussed but must be devastating. Imagine being forced to kill other human beings repeatedly, knowing that you will eventually be killed in the same way. Imagine hearing the crowd cheer when you kill someone, their death becoming your temporary reprieve. Imagine living every day knowing that you are a piece of entertainment, that your life and death are meaningless beyond the spectacle they provide. The crowd that watches the games includes people from all social classes. The wealthy sit in the best seats close to the action. You and other poor Romans sit in the upper tiers far from the arena floor. But everyone watches. Everyone participates in this normalized mass slaughter. Children attend the games and learn that human life is cheap, that death is entertainment. The games serve a political purpose. The emperors and wealthy politicians who sponsor the games are buying loyalty and preventing unrest. The phrase "bread in circuses" captures the strategy. Keep the population fed and entertained, and they will not rebel. The games are a pressure release valve, allowing the population to satisfy their violent impulses vicariously rather than directing that violence at the authorities. The economic system behind the games is vast. Animals must be captured and transported from across the empire. Gladiators must be purchased, housed, trained, and fed. The arena itself requires constant maintenance. Thousands of workers are employed in supporting the games. Death is big business in Rome. Some philosophers and writers criticize the games as barbaric, but they are a tiny minority. The vast majority of Romans see nothing wrong with mass slaughter for entertainment. It is normal. It is traditional. It is Roman culture. The idea that killing people and animals for fun might be immoral is not widely accepted. You attend the games because they are one of the few entertainments available to you. You watch people die because there is nothing else to do. The spectacle is overwhelming, the violence so extreme that it becomes almost abstract. You cheer with the crowd not because you are cruel, but because the alternative is sitting in your miserable apartment thinking about your own suffering. But sometimes, watching the games, you cannot help but imagine yourself in the arena. You are one accusation away, one crime of desperation away from being the entertainment instead of the spectator. The people dying in the arena are people like you. Poor, powerless, expendable. You watch them die and know that could easily be you. The games also feature mock naval battles where the arena is flooded and ships brought in. Prisoners and criminals are forced to fight and die in these reenactments of historical battles. The scale of the spectacle is enormous, and so is the death toll. Hundreds can die in a single naval battle staged for entertainment. After a day of games, the arena floor is covered in blood, body parts, and dead animals. Slaves clean it all up overnight, preparing for the next day's entertainment. The bodies are dragged out and disposed of. The blood is washed away, and then it starts again. Day after day, year after year, the killing continues. This is Roman entertainment. This is what passes for culture in the greatest empire the world has ever known. The amphitheater is a temple to violence, a monument to the casual brutality of Roman society. The games are not an aberration. They are the perfect expression of Roman values, power, domination, and the absolute cheapness of human life. You would not survive the psychological impact of living in a society where mass slaughter is considered entertainment. Religion in ancient Rome is not about comfort or spiritual fulfillment. It is about fear. You live in constant terror of offending the gods, of missing a ritual, of misinterpreting an omen. The gods are everywhere, watching everything, ready to punish the slightest transgression. And the punishments are not just spiritual. They are immediate, physical, and often fatal. The Roman pantheon includes dozens of major gods and hundreds of minor deities, spirits, and supernatural forces. Jupiter, Juno, Mars, Venus, Neptune, and many others must all be appeased constantly. Each god has specific requirements, specific days of worship, specific sacrifices. Keeping track of all these obligations is impossible. Yet failing to honor any god can bring disaster upon you and your family. The gods are not benevolent. They are petty, jealous, and cruel. They punish humans for arbitrary reasons. A god might destroy your life because you failed to make the proper offering, or because someone in your family inadvertently offended them, or simply because they are bored. The stories of the gods are filled with examples of divine cruelty toward humans. You are taught these stories from childhood, learning that the gods are to be feared, not loved. Omens are everywhere, and they must be constantly interpreted. A bird flying in the wrong direction is an omen. A strange cloud formation is an omen. A dream is an omen. An animal behaving oddly is an omen. Thunder on a clear day is an omen. Everything is potentially a message from the gods, and missing or misinterpreting these messages can lead to disaster. But you do not have the education or resources to interpret omens correctly. The wealthy employ augurs and haruspices, professional priests who claim to understand the will of the gods. They examine the entrails of sacrificed animals, watch the flight patterns of birds, and interpret dreams. Their services are expensive, far beyond what you can afford, so you are left to interpret omens on your own, never certain if you are understanding them correctly, always afraid you are missing something crucial. Religious rituals must be performed perfectly. A single mistake in a ritual means the whole ceremony is invalid and must be repeated. If you are participating in a public ceremony and make a mistake, you might be blamed if disaster strikes the city. The pressure to perform rituals correctly is immense, but the rituals are complex and easy to get wrong. Sacrifices are expected constantly. For any important event, a sacrifice must be made. Planning to travel? Sacrifice. Starting a new job? Sacrifice. Someone in your family sick? Sacrifice. The problem is that sacrifices cost money. Even the cheapest sacrifice, a bit of grain or a small cake, costs something. Larger sacrifices require animals, chickens, sheep, pigs, or cattle, depending on the importance of the occasion. You cannot afford these sacrifices, but not making them risks angering the gods. There are also household gods, the Lares and Penates, who must be honored daily. Every home has a small shrine where offerings are made to these spirits. Even in your miserable apartment, you are expected to maintain the shrine and make daily offerings. These gods protect the household, but only if they are properly honored. Neglect them and disaster will strike your family. The Vestal virgins maintain the sacred fire in the Temple of Vesta. If this fire ever goes out, it is considered a catastrophic omen for all of Rome. The Vestal who allowed the fire to go out can be buried alive as punishment. This level of religious anxiety pervades society. Everyone feels the weight of religious obligation, the constant fear of divine punishment. Magic and curses are very real to you. People regularly hire magicians to curse their enemies. You might find a curse tablet buried near your home, inscribed with prayers to underworld gods asking them to harm you. These curses cause genuine terror. You believe they can actually kill you or make you sick or destroy your livelihood. You live in fear of magic. Likewise, the evil eye is a constant threat. Someone looking at you with envy or malice can curse you with the evil eye, bringing bad luck and misfortune. You wear amulets to ward off the evil eye. You make gestures to protect yourself. You are constantly vigilant about who is looking at you and how they might be feeling toward you. Disease is often attributed to divine punishment or demonic possession. If you become seriously ill, it is assumed you or your family angered a god. This adds psychological torment to physical suffering. Not only are you sick, but you feel guilty, wondering what you did to deserve this punishment. Your illness becomes a moral failing, proof of your unworthiness. The underworld is a terrifying prospect. Romans believe that after death, your spirit descends to the underworld, a dark, joyless place where shades of the dead exist in eternal gloom. There is no heaven, no reward for virtue. Everyone goes to the same terrible place. Death is not release or peace. It is entering an eternal nightmare. Proper burial is essential to avoid becoming a restless ghost. If your body is not properly buried with the correct rituals, your spirit will be trapped, unable to enter the underworld. It will wander the earth as a ghost, suffering and causing harm to the living. But proper burial is expensive. If you die without money, your body might be thrown into a mass grave with minimal ritual, dooming your spirit to eternal wandering. Festivals fill the Roman calendar, and participation is often mandatory. Religious festivals provide entertainment for the masses, but they also require your participation. You must attend certain ceremonies. You must make offerings. You must participate in processions. Missing these obligations is dangerous both socially and spiritually. The emperor is also divine or will become divine after death. You must worship the emperor as a god. This is not optional. There are temples to the divine emperors throughout Rome. You must make offerings and show proper reverence. Failure to worship the emperor can be interpreted as treason, punishable by death. Religion and politics are inseparable. Foreign gods are sometimes adopted into the Roman pantheon, but new religions are often viewed with suspicion. Christianity, during its early years, is persecuted because Christians refuse to worship the Roman gods. This refusal is seen as atheism and treason. Christians are executed for their beliefs, often in the arena as part of the games. Prodigies, unusual events that suggest divine displeasure, cause citywide panic. A two-headed calf is born? Prodigy. A statue appears to weep? Prodigy. These events require immediate ritual response to appease the gods. The Senate meets to discuss the proper response. Sacrifices are made. Sometimes these prodigies lead to mass panic. Your dreams are messages from the gods and must be carefully interpreted. A bad dream can ruin your entire day as you worry about what disaster it foretells. Dream interpretation is a serious business. There are books on the subject. People consult experts. A particularly vivid or frightening dream might convince you to cancel important plans or take expensive precautionary measures. Pollution, spiritual contamination, is a constant concern. Certain things make you ritually unclean. Contact with a corpse, childbirth, menstruation, certain diseases all cause pollution. When you are polluted, you must undergo purification rituals before you can participate in religious ceremonies or enter certain spaces. These purification rituals cost money and take time. The calendar is filled with dies nefasti, unlucky days when certain activities must be avoided. Legal business cannot be conducted. Travel is discouraged. Important decisions must be postponed. But the calendar is complex and you do not always know which days are unlucky. You might inadvertently do something on an unlucky day and bring misfortune upon yourself. Cursing and oath-taking are serious religious acts. When you swear an oath, you invoke the gods as witnesses. Breaking an oath brings divine punishment. But in a society where you are constantly desperate, where survival sometimes requires deception, the pressure of sacred oaths creates constant moral and spiritual distress. Priests have enormous power because they claim to mediate between humans and gods. They interpret omens, perform rituals, and declare what the gods want. But priests are often corrupt, using their position for personal gain. You know they are exploiting the population's fear, but you cannot risk ignoring them. They might be charlatans or they might actually have divine favor. You cannot take that chance. The religious system reinforces the social hierarchy. The wealthy can afford elaborate sacrifices and gain divine favor. They can hire priests to perform rituals correctly. They can make generous offerings. The gods seem to favor them, which the priests explain as proof of their virtue. Your poverty is interpreted as evidence that the gods disfavor you, creating a religious justification for your suffering. This pervasive religious fear adds another layer of misery to your existence. You cannot simply focus on survival. You must also constantly worry about invisible supernatural forces that might destroy you, for reasons you cannot understand. You live in a world where the gods are real, cruel, and capricious, and there is nothing you can do to guarantee their favor. You would not survive the psychological burden of this constant religious terror. You live in a slave society. Slavery is not just an institution in ancient Rome. It is the foundation of the entire economy, the basis of the social structure, and a constant reminder of how little your own freedom actually means. Slaves are everywhere, performing every conceivable task, and their presence shapes every aspect of your life. The number of slaves in Rome is staggering. Historians estimate that approximately 1/3 of the population of Rome consists of slaves. In a city of 1 million people, perhaps 300,000 are enslaved. You see slaves constantly. They work in wealthy households, in shops, in construction, in every industry. They are so common that their presence becomes invisible, just part of the background of daily life. But slavery is not invisible to you in another sense. It is a constant reminder of how precarious your own position is. You are technically a free citizen, but your freedom is practically meaningless. You are one debt, one crime, one military defeat away from enslavement. Debtors can be sold into slavery. Criminals are enslaved. Prisoners of war become slaves. The boundary between your free poverty and slavery is very thin. Let us talk about how people become slaves. Most slaves are prisoners of war. Rome is constantly at war, conquering new territories and enslaving the defeated populations. After a successful military campaign, tens of thousands of prisoners are marched back to Rome and sold in the slave markets. Entire populations are enslaved. If your village or city is conquered by Rome, you become a slave. Your freedom, your life, everything you had is simply taken. Children born to slaves are automatically slaves. This means slavery is perpetual. The children of slaves will be slaves. Their children will be slaves. Slavery continues across generations with no hope of escape. If you are born a slave, you will almost certainly die a slave, and so will your children and grandchildren. People are also enslaved for debt. If you cannot pay your debts, your creditor can have you sold into slavery. This is a constant threat hanging over you. You are always in debt. You owe rent. You owe money to the person who sold you food on credit. If you cannot pay, you could be enslaved. This keeps you compliant, desperate, willing to accept any conditions to avoid enslavement. Kidnapping is another source of slaves. Pirates and bandits capture people and sell them into slavery. Children are particularly vulnerable. If you are traveling and attacked by bandits, you might end up in chains, your entire identity erased as you are sold into slavery. There is no reliable way to prove you are a free citizen if you have no documents or witnesses. The slave markets are horrific. Human beings are displayed naked, examined like livestock, poked and prodded by potential buyers. Families are separated. Children are torn from their mothers. Husbands and wives are sold to different owners. The psychological trauma is immense, but no one cares. Slaves are property, not people. Slaves perform every type of labor. In wealthy households, slaves cook, clean, care for children, manage finances, and provide entertainment. In shops, slaves do the actual work while the owner profits. On farms, slaves work the fields. In mines, slaves dig until they die. In mills, slaves turn the heavy grinding stones. In brothels, slaves are forced into prostitution. There is no aspect of Roman life that does not depend on slave labor. The treatment of slaves varies wildly. Some slaves, particularly educated Greek slaves who serve as tutors or secretaries, are treated relatively well. They live in comfortable conditions and might even be granted freedom eventually. But these slaves are a tiny minority. Most slaves live in terrible conditions, are beaten regularly, and work until they die. Agricultural slaves have perhaps the worst lives. They work in chain gangs on large estates, shackled together to prevent escape. They sleep in underground barracks, locked in at night. They are worked brutally, with minimal food and no medical care. The mortality rate is extremely high. When a slave becomes too sick or injured to work, they are simply left to die or killed outright. New slaves are cheaper than caring for damaged ones. Mining slaves face a different horror. They work deep underground in narrow, unstable tunnels. Cave-ins kill many. The air is bad, filled with dust that destroys their lungs. They are chained to prevent escape. They never see daylight. Most mining slaves die within a few years of starting work. It is essentially a death sentence carried out slowly. Galley slaves power the Roman ships. They are chained to their rowing benches, forced to row for hours at a time. They are whipped to maintain the rowing pace. They are not released from their chains even to relieve themselves. They live in their own filth. In battle, if the ship is sinking, they drown chained to their benches. There is no escape. Sexual slavery is common and openly accepted. Wealthy men own attractive young slaves specifically for sexual purposes. These slaves have no right to refuse. They are raped regularly by their owners and anyone the owner gives permission to. Female slaves are particularly vulnerable. They can be raped by their owner, by his guests, by his sons. They will become pregnant from these rapes and their children will be born into slavery. Gladiator slaves fight in the arena. They are trained to kill other slaves for entertainment. Those who survive multiple fights become famous, but survival is rare. Most gladiator slaves die within their first few years. Those who do survive long enough to win their freedom are physically and psychologically destroyed by years of killing. Slave revolts happen occasionally, and they terrify the authorities. The most famous is the revolt led by Spartacus, which briefly threatened Rome itself. When the revolt was finally crushed, 6,000 captured slaves were crucified along the Appian Way. Their bodies were left hanging as a warning. This is how Rome deals with slaves who rebel. The message is clear: submission or death. The fear of slave revolt is why slaves are treated with such brutality. The population of slaves is huge, and if they united, they could overwhelm their masters. Violence and terror keep them divided and submissive. Slaves who show any sign of independence or pride are beaten or killed as examples. The entire system depends on constant intimidation. Some slaves can earn their freedom through manumission. An owner can legally free a slave, and this freed person becomes a freedman or freedwoman. However, freedmen are not truly free. They remain clients of their former master, owing him loyalty and service. They face social discrimination. They cannot hold certain positions. Their children are free, but they themselves carry the stain of slavery forever. Most slaves never achieve freedom. They work until they die and then they are replaced. Their lives are completely controlled by their owners. They can be beaten, raped, or killed without legal consequence. Killing your own slave is not murder. It is destruction of property, and even that is rarely prosecuted. The legal status of slaves is clear. They are things, not persons. They have no rights. They cannot marry legally. They cannot own property. They cannot testify in court except under torture. Their testimony is only considered valid if it is extracted through extreme pain, because the law assumes slaves will lie unless tortured. Your interaction with slaves is complicated. Some slaves are better off than you are. A wealthy household's educated slave has better food, better housing, and better medical care than you do. This creates resentment. How can a slave live better than a free citizen? But this resentment is exactly what the system wants. It keeps you and the slaves from uniting against the wealthy who exploit both of you. You might work alongside slaves. At a construction site, you might be working next to enslaved men doing the same brutal labor. The only difference is that you are paid a pittance while they are paid nothing. But this small difference is important to you. You cling to your free status even though it means almost nothing in practical terms. The omnipresence of slavery warps the entire society. It makes all labor devalued because slave labor is available. Why pay a fair wage to free workers when you can buy slaves? This keeps your wages depressed. It keeps you desperate. The existence of slavery makes your own poverty worse. Slavery also normalizes extreme violence and dehumanization. When society accepts that some humans are property to be used and discarded, it becomes easier to treat all lower-class people as less than human. The brutality of slavery seeps into all social relations. Violence becomes normal. Cruelty becomes acceptable. The system is not just about slaves. It is about maintaining a hierarchy where the powerful can treat everyone below them as disposable. You live surrounded by human misery on a scale that is hard to comprehend. 300,000 enslaved people in your city. Most living in terrible conditions, their lives controlled absolutely by their owners. And you know that you are barely better off. You are not enslaved, but you are not truly free. You are caught between slavery and freedom, with very little actual power or security. This is what it means to live in a slave society. You would not survive the psychological and moral weight of living in this system. The physical environment of ancient Rome is trying to kill you. Beyond the disease, the poverty, and the social oppression, the city itself is a death trap. The buildings are unstable. The water is poisoned. The air is toxic. And fires sweep through the city regularly, killing thousands. Every day you survive is a victory against an environment designed without regard for human safety. Let us start with lead poisoning, which is slowly killing the entire population. The Romans used lead everywhere. The water pipes are made of lead. Wine is often stored in lead containers, and some wines are sweetened with lead acetate, which tastes sweet, but is highly toxic. Cosmetics contain lead. Cooking pots are sometimes made of lead. You are exposed to lead constantly, and it is accumulating in your body, causing irreversible damage. Lead poisoning causes numerous symptoms. It damages the brain, causing confusion, memory problems, and personality changes. It causes abdominal pain and constipation. It damages the kidneys. It causes anemia. It stunts children's growth and development. The symptoms develop slowly, so you do not realize you are being poisoned. You just feel progressively worse over time, never knowing why. The water supply is contaminated with lead from the pipes. Every time you drink from a public fountain, you are consuming lead. The wealthy have private water supplies with lead plumbing in their homes. They are actually more exposed to lead than you are, but everyone in Rome is affected to some degree. Lead poisoning may have contributed to the decline of Roman leadership, as the elite class slowly went mad from chronic lead exposure. The air in Rome is filthy. Thousands of cooking fires, industrial furnaces, and heating braziers fill the air with smoke. The city is perpetually covered in a haze of smoke and pollution. You breathe this toxic air every day. Your lungs are gradually damaged by the constant smoke exposure. Respiratory diseases are common. Everyone coughs. Everyone has trouble breathing. The air is killing you slowly. Industrial pollution is everywhere. Tanneries release toxic chemicals. Potteries release toxic fumes. Metalworking shops release poisonous smoke. These industries are located throughout the city, not confined to specific districts. You live and work surrounded by toxic pollution, with no understanding of the long-term health effects and no regulations to protect you. Fire is perhaps the greatest environmental danger. The insulae where you live are made mostly of wood. They are built packed closely together with no space between buildings. Thousands of people use open flames for cooking and heating in these wooden structures. Fire breaks out constantly, and when it does, it spreads rapidly through entire neighborhoods. There is no effective fire department. Rome eventually develops a firefighting force, the Vigils, but their equipment is primitive. They have buckets, axes, and a few simple pumps. When a major fire breaks out in a densely populated area, these tools are useless. The fire spreads faster than they can fight it. Entire districts burn to the ground. You live on the 5th floor of a wooden building. If fire breaks out below you, you are trapped. The stairs become impassable quickly. The only way out is to jump, which from the 5th floor means death or serious injury. You think about this possibility often, lying awake at night, smelling smoke from cooking fires and wondering if today will be the day your building burns. The Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD burns for 6 days and destroys 2/3 of the city. Thousands die. Hundreds of thousands are left homeless. This is not a unique event. It is the most famous fire, but major fires happen regularly in Rome. Smaller fires that destroy individual buildings or neighborhoods occur almost daily. Fire is a constant threat. Building collapses kill thousands every year. The insulae are poorly constructed from cheap materials. Landlords maximize profit by building as high and as cheaply as possible. Buildings 6 or 7 stories tall stand on foundations designed for 3 stories. The structures are fundamentally unsound. They collapse regularly with no warning, crushing everyone inside. Sometimes buildings collapse gradually. You hear creaking and see cracks appearing in the walls. You watch in horror as your building slowly falls apart around you. But you cannot leave. You have nowhere else to go and no money for different housing, so you stay, hoping the building does not collapse until you have found another place. Many people die still hoping and planning to leave eventually. Sometimes buildings collapse suddenly. You are sleeping, and without warning, the entire structure comes down. Tons of wood and masonry crush you. If you are not killed instantly, you are trapped under rubble, slowly dying from your injuries or suffocating in the debris. Rescue efforts are minimal. Most people trapped in collapsed buildings die there. The streets themselves are dangerous. They are paved with stone, which becomes slick when wet. There are no sidewalks, so pedestrians share the narrow streets with carts, horses, and livestock. You are constantly at risk of being trampled or run over. The streets are also filled with trash, human waste, and dead animals. You walk through this filth barefoot, every step a risk of infection. The Tiber River floods regularly. When it floods, entire neighborhoods are submerged. The water is contaminated with sewage, dead animals, and industrial waste. People drown. Diseases spread through the standing water after floods. Your apartment could be several feet underwater with no warning. Floods destroy food stores, making the food situation even more precarious. The heat in summer is oppressive. Rome is hot and your apartment has no ventilation. The wooden structure absorbs heat during the day and radiates it at night. Sleeping is almost impossible. Heat exhaustion and heat stroke kill many people every summer. The elderly and young children are particularly vulnerable. You see bodies of people who simply overheated and died. In winter, the cold is brutal. You have no heat beyond a small brazier, which is both inadequate and dangerous. The brazier creates toxic fumes in your poorly ventilated room. Carbon monoxide poisoning kills people regularly, but without the brazier you would freeze to death. So you choose between poisoning and freezing and hope you survive either way. Earthquakes strike occasionally. Rome is not in a highly seismic zone, but earthquakes do occur. When they do, the poorly constructed insulae crumble immediately. An earthquake that would cause minimal damage to well-built structures can collapse entire neighborhoods in Rome. If you survive the initial collapse, you still face the aftermath. Fires from overturned braziers, floods from broken aqueducts, and general chaos. The city's sanitation system, while advanced for the time, is still inadequate. The sewers carry waste out of the city, but they are often blocked or overflowing. Raw sewage backs up into the streets. You walk through human waste every day. The smell is overwhelming. The disease risk is enormous. The sanitation system that Rome is so proud of barely works in practice. The public latrines are communal toilets where dozens of people sit side by side on benches with holes, their waste falling into sewers below. There is no privacy. These latrines breed disease. The sponges used for cleaning, shared by everyone, spread infection. You would avoid these public toilets if possible, but you have no choice. The only alternative is the chamber pot in your apartment, which creates its own health hazards. Rats are everywhere, living in the walls of buildings, in the sewers, in the trash that fills the streets. They carry diseases, including plague. They contaminate food supplies. They are impossible to eliminate because the entire environment is ideal for them. You live surrounded by rats, hearing them scratch in the walls at night, finding their droppings in your food. Insects are equally prevalent. Mosquitoes breed in the standing water throughout the city and spread malaria. Fleas spread typhus. Lice are universal. You are constantly covered in insect bites, which often become infected. The constant itching is maddening. You scratch until you bleed, then the wounds become infected, starting another cycle of suffering. The construction sites where you work are death traps. There are no safety regulations. Heavy materials are lifted with primitive equipment that regularly fails. Things fall constantly, crushing workers. You see injuries and deaths almost every day. There is no compensation, no investigation. Another worker is hired immediately and work continues. Toxic materials are handled without protection. Lead, mercury, and other poisonous substances are used in various industries. You might work with these materials having no idea they are killing you. By the time you realize you have been poisoned, the damage is irreversible. Your body will slowly fail, and you will die knowing that your work poisoned you. This environmental nightmare is your daily reality. You are being poisoned by lead, choked by smoke, threatened by fire and collapse, and surrounded by filth and disease. The physical environment of Rome is actively hostile to human life. Yet people call this the greatest city in the world. You would not survive these constant environmental dangers. As the sun sets over Rome, you drag yourself back to your apartment after another day of brutal labor. Your body is broken. Your feet are bleeding. Your back aches. Your hands are raw. You are dehydrated, malnourished, and exhausted beyond measure. But the day is not over. The misery continues into the night, and sleep, when it finally comes, brings no real rest. You climb the 5 flights of narrow, dark stairs to your apartment. The stairs are barely wide enough for one person. There is no light. You climb in complete darkness, feeling your way along the wall, your torn feet screaming with every step. Other residents push past you in the darkness, everyone exhausted and irritable. Arguments break out over who should move aside. Sometimes these arguments turn violent. You reach your apartment and enter the room you share with 7 other people. Everyone is returning from their work at around the same time. The room is dark, hot, and the smell is overwhelming. Human bodies, human waste, rotting food, and the general filth of poverty create a stench that never dissipates. You are so used to it that you barely notice anymore, but it is always there. There is no evening meal for most poor Romans. If you are lucky, you ate your grain ration during the day. If not, you go to bed hungry. Your stomach gnaws at itself. The hunger is a physical pain that makes sleep difficult, but food costs money, and you have none left after paying rent and buying the absolute minimum to survive. So you go to bed hungry, as you do most nights. You have no evening activities, no entertainment, no leisure. The wealthy spend their evenings at dinner parties, attending theater performances, or socializing at the baths. You spend your evenings lying on a thin mat on a hard floor, trying to ignore the pain in your body and the hunger in your stomach. This is your life. Work, exhaustion, sleep, repeat. The oil lamp that provides light is expensive to operate. Oil costs money you do not have, so you sit in darkness once the sun goes down. In winter, when the days are short, you might spend 12 or more hours in darkness every night. You cannot read, not that you are literate. You cannot see to do any tasks. You simply exist in the darkness, waiting for sleep. The cold in winter is intense. Your thin blanket provides minimal warmth. You curl up tightly, trying to conserve body heat. Sometimes you huddle together with the other people in the room, sharing warmth like animals. There is no dignity in poverty. You do whatever it takes to survive the night. People freeze to death regularly in the winter, simply not waking up after a particularly cold night. In summer, the heat is suffocating. The wooden building absorbs heat all day and radiates it at night. The lack of ventilation means the heat is trapped. You lie sweating on your mat, unable to sleep, the heat making you dizzy and nauseous. Heat stroke kills people in their sleep during Roman summers. You hope you are not next. The noise never stops. Even at night, Rome is loud. After sunset, the carts are allowed in the streets, so the rumble of wagon wheels and the shouts of drivers continue all night. People argue in the streets. Drunks sing and fight. Babies cry. The city has 1 million people packed into a small area, and they are all making noise constantly. True quiet does not exist in Rome. The people you share your room with are also sources of noise. Old Marcus coughs blood all night. The children cry from hunger. Julia sometimes brings clients back to the apartment, and you listen to the sounds of her working, trying to ignore what is happening a few feet away. There is no privacy, no escape. You hear everything. Everyone hears you. The insects are worse at night. Bedbugs live in your mat and come out to feed while you sleep. You wake up covered in bites, your blood sustaining thousands of parasites. Mosquitoes buzz around your head, biting any exposed skin. You spend half the night swatting at insects, the other half scratching the bites that drive you mad with itching. Sleep becomes impossible. Rats move through the walls constantly. You hear them scratching, squeaking, fighting with each other. Sometimes they come into the room, bold enough to scavenge while people sleep. You have been bitten by rats in your sleep. Everyone you know has been bitten. The rats are everywhere, and there is nothing you can do to stop them. Your dreams when you finally sleep are often nightmares. You dream of crucifixion. You dream of starvation. You dream of building collapses in fire. Your subconscious processes the trauma of daily life, creating vivid, terrifying dreams that wake you in panic. You sit up gasping, your heart racing, only to remember that your waking life is barely better than your nightmares. Sometimes you dream of better things. You dream of having enough food. You dream of a clean, safe place to live. You dream of not being in constant pain. These dreams are worse than the nightmares because you wake up to realize they were not real. The disappointment is crushing. You would rather not dream at all than have glimpses of a life you will never have. You think about death, not actively planning suicide, but simply acknowledging that death might be preferable to this existence. You are not yet 30 years old, but you feel ancient. Your body is broken. You have no hope of things improving. Death would at least be rest. Many people in your situation do kill themselves. You understand why. The question is not why people commit suicide, but why anyone chooses to continue living under these conditions. The night hours stretch endlessly. When you cannot sleep, which is often, you lie in the darkness thinking. You think about the injustice of your situation. You think about the wealthy Romans who live in comfort while you suffer. You think about the system that keeps you trapped in poverty, but these thoughts lead nowhere. There is no action you can take. Revolution is impossible. Individual advancement is impossible. You are trapped, and thinking about it only makes the misery worse. You worry about tomorrow. Will you find work? Will you be injured? Will the building collapse? Will you be accused of a crime? Every day brings new potential disasters, and you have no control over any of them. This constant anxiety prevents sleep. You lie awake worrying, exhausting yourself mentally even as your body desperately needs rest. Your roommates are also lying awake, wrestling with the same fears and despairs. Sometimes people talk quietly in the darkness, sharing their suffering, but more often everyone suffers in silence. What is there to say? Everyone knows how bad things are. Talking about it changes nothing. So you lie in the darkness alone together, each person trapped in their own private hell. The danger of fire is worse at night. People use braziers and lamps, open flames in wooden buildings. You smell smoke constantly and wonder if this is the night the building burns. You lie awake listening for any sound of panic, any indication that you need to run. But even if you hear the alarm, you are on the 5th floor. By the time fire reaches you, escape is probably impossible. So you lie there waiting, hoping tonight is not the night. Eventually, exhaustion overcomes discomfort and fear. You fall into an uneasy sleep. But this sleep is not restful. You wake frequently, disturbed by noise, pain, insects, or nightmares. You never enter deep sleep. You never feel truly rested. When dawn comes, you wake feeling as tired as when you lay down. This is what passes for sleep in ancient Rome. The first light of dawn filters through the small opening in the wall. Another night survived. You sit up on your mat, feeling every injury, every ache, every pain that your body has accumulated. You are 30 years old, but you feel 60. Your life is more than half over. You will probably not live past 40. These are the facts. This is your reality. You look around the dark room at your fellow sufferers. Everyone is slowly stirring, facing another day of the same suffering. This is life in ancient Rome for the 99%. Endless labor, constant pain, inadequate food, terrible housing, no hope of improvement, and eventually an early death. This is not living. This is surviving day by day, night by night, until you cannot survive anymore. You take a deep breath and prepare to face another day, knowing it will be just like yesterday and tomorrow will be just like today. This is your existence. This is ancient Rome. And you, with your modern expectations of comfort, safety, and basic human dignity, would not last a day in this world. Welcome to the reality of ancient Rome.